You talk about the empire and we talk about imperialism, but what you've identified is the fact that inside of imperialist politics, as I would call it, bourgeois politics, the officially recognized political spectrum goes from the left to the right of bourgeois imperialist politics. And outside of that is officially doesn't exist. So what you were talking about, both of you, about this omission, I come from the communist left. I don't even call myself left anymore, because left has become a term for left imperialist.
They left you.
A liberal. I'm not a liberal. I'm in favour of the working class and opposed to imperialism. And that doesn't exist in the spectrum that's officially recognised. I feature fully in the what did you call that? This world of omission. You know, people like me don't exist. We do not exist in the media. Our voice, our viewpoint. For example, Brexit happened recently. You would not know from British mainstream media coverage that there were progressive, working-class reasons for supporting Brexit. The only reason you heard...
I didn't know.
The only reasons that are given in the media are right-wing, nationalist, racist reasons. But the reasons that the working class had for voting for Brexit were never expressed. And after the ruling class lost that vote, were shocked to find that they could lose a vote when they told us how to vote and we didn't go along with it. We have been bombarded ever since with a narrative of how backward and racist and awful we are and how we shouldn't be allowed to vote again.
Yes. Yeah, and that is the sin of Julian Assange, is that he revealed the truth when we know, when he's on trial in this country and we have members of the American political elite that lied to Congress now have very well-paid gigs on cable TV. And they're not facing justice, okay? Because there is a two-tier justice system. There's one for us, and there's one for them. And people know it now. It's so obvious. Jump in.
I just wanted to come back on that because I think a lot of things in recent years, and Julian Assange's case is one of them, have been teaching people lessons about the nature of the state that the state would much rather we didn't know. And they used to be much better at hiding these things from us. They've become careless, partly because actually they're quite divided, our rulers. They are divided. That's how Trump got elected. That's how Brexit happened. There's divisions amongst the ruling class. There's a crisis. They're fighting about how to survive it. We're learning lessons about the nature of the media, about the nature of the justice system, about the nature of the police and the army, the crimes that our rulers are prepared to commit abroad, the corporatocracy, they call that. Behind closed doors, who is talking to who and who's issuing the orders to whom? We apparently elect our representatives, but who do they really represent? We just had in this country, after the Brexit vote, we watched our elected representatives, who are supposedly answerable to us, spend 3.5 years arguing with one another about how not to do the thing they were supposed to be doing. This is teaching lessons to workers. You were asking, Peter, why does everyone go along with it? How do they get away with it? I believe that one of the answers to that question is to do with the balance of class forces. The working class in this country and across the Western countries has become disorganized and very leaderless. And the ruling class has become very arrogant, thinks it can do anything, feels it doesn't have to even pretend to its population anymore.
And it makes them sloppy.
Because it's the population that, when it's organised, can hold the ruling class to account. It's not this journalist or that journalist. It's the mass of the people behind the journalists.
But don't you think?
I guess that explains how they can keep pulling the chemical weapons farce in Syria.
But don't you think? Let me go
because they're so brazen, and like you were just saying.
Yeah, but that's why I said they're so sloppy about it, because they're so arrogant.
They're sloppy because they're arrogant, but in their arrogance, they're teaching workers lessons, and the workers are becoming angry, and they will regret their arrogance. That's for sure.
Neil.
In fact, what we were talking about at lunch, it relates back to what Mike was just saying here. say, maybe more than Mike want to say, which is that we have seen what was supposed to be the left, what was supposed to be the voice of the working class, hijacked by liberalism and turned into a self-referential, self-annihilating channel for identity politics, which is the opposite of working class politics.
I'm a guy in India. It's called a self-licking ice cone, ice cream cone, okay? That's what it is.
So, identity politics is the opposite of working class politics because everyone is encouraged to look for what makes them separate. Everyone is encouraged to look at why they're different from one another and why it is that they can't understand one another. And working class politics is about saying we have a common class interest and on that basis we're going to get together and have power and have a voice and have an organisation and fight back. And so it's not an accident that the working class movement has been hijacked this way. It's purposeful because it neuters us, it emasculates us, it takes away our power, it divides us, it makes us fight and blame one another and shout about who's the most oppressed amongst ourselves like idiots instead of getting together to fight the powers that be, and they're laughing all the way to the bank.
We end up being the ultimate victim, but we can't virtue signal about it. That's exactly what happens there.
And the massive workers, sorry, on that point, but when we were talking about the language, what we were talking about at lunch, Peter, this point about language is that we have had this substitution made, whereby instead of struggling against injustice, we are fighting over the words to describe injustices. And this substitution of a struggle over language for an actual struggle against injustice has been done on us, and now what's happening is the massive poorer workers feel terrified to open their mouths in case they use the wrong word. We're talking about where do we go from here, and Eva's pinpointed the importance of an independent media. We've all been talking about that tonight. And the importance, as Mike was saying, of honesty. We need to rebuild our organisation from the bottom up. We have allowed our organisations to be subverted, to become a controlled opposition. Every official opposition movement in this country now has its aims put at the service of the Labour Party electoral machine, and anything that they think doesn't help them get elected, including an opinion of any of its leaders, gets put down. We recently held a meeting. I'm part of the newly formed Workers' Party. We're exactly trying to address this issue, that there isn't an independent working class voice, there isn't an independent working class media in this country. We need to rebuild, we need to start again. That's just a fact. But we need a leadership that isn't scared. We need a leadership that doesn't say what's electable, but what is true. Not what is electable, because who decides what's electable? It's the state machine that says this far and no further. This is how things are, and if you want to come in, if you want to join the club, you have to do it our way. You have to be our man. But we need leaders who don't want to run their system. We need leaders who want to speak for us and represent us, because it is us or them. We can't run their system and make it work for us. We need a system that works for workers.
In that case, do you agree that we have to have a constitution that makes it illegal for anybody to hide crime behind secrecy, and that it must be the case that anybody performing the duty of exposing crime must be permitted to break that secrecy to report crime to the nation? Otherwise, the old regime endures and smuggles its way past into the new. Do you agree?
Brilliant question.
Can I come in, Greg?
Joti, yeah. Joti.
With the best will in the world and the greatest of respect to the comrade in the audience who asked this question, I think it's the wrong question. You can write any rule book you like. We could sit here and come up with the perfect rule book. We could, impose. We could have it agreed on by voted. All the people accept it. If you have a society where a few people control all the wealth, because it's a society based on capitalist exploitation, a class society where there's a tiny minority who have the wealth and the power. It doesn't matter what the rules are, the rules will never apply to the people in power. You cannot hold power to account when power and money are vested in a tiny handful of people. It isn't possible. You have to change the system if you want equality, if you want fairness, if you want the rule of law, if you want any of the things you're talking about, if you want peace, if you want jobs, if you want homes, if you want security, if you want pensions, if you want fairness in international relations. You can't have this system. You know, we started the French Revolution, the American Revolution started with these lovely principles of equality and fraternity, but the capitalist system has an inevitable development that got us from there to here. If we try and go back to there, we'll end up here.
I just want to add that, you know, we've talked about journalists being smeared or publications being smeared, but now it's almost every single independent publication or journalist who are being smeared, even to the extent that the OPCW, some might call them whistleblowers, the people that have spoken out about the discrepancies or the falsities of the OPCW report, they are being smeared. Or mainstream journalists are being smeared because they question the OPCW report. But what I was going to say when we were talking earlier is that they're afraid of us. That's why they're smearing us. And we don't give a shit. Pardon my language, but I don't care if they smear us. And that's why they're afraid.
We have to recognize that the people who are being targeted must be doing something right, and that therefore it's a badge of honor. We won't be intimidated. We will keep on making our voices heard, and we will build bigger, louder voices. We have to have our own separate media, because the mainstream, the official, the imperialist, the corporate media will never represent us, will never tell us the truth. We should stop expecting it to.
Liberalism.
So Fra was asking about, is the rise of Sinn Féin across Ireland a sign that the duopoly, the establishment, the status quo everywhere is under attack and can be defeated? And I think the short answer is yes. I'll give a slightly more complicated answer now. When it comes to the rise of Sinn Féin in Ireland, I think actually it's one of the fantastic side effects of the Brexit vote. I, for one, am very, very happy to see, finally, the prospect of a reunited Ireland is galloping towards us and has been massively accelerated since the Brexit vote happened, and that's a wonderful side effect. But there's something else that's happening around the world. Where you talked about this duopoly everywhere. In every capitalist country almost, you see this Tweedledum and Tweedledee game that gets played. The left and the right, the two parties who have these fake debates and controversies amongst themselves and argue on the head of the pin, and the media's full of what they're arguing about. But they really play a game of passing the power between themselves whilst carrying out the programme of the ruling class. And that is what we see everywhere, but that is actually coming under threat. And one of the ways you can tell it's coming under threat at this time, and there's a crisis everywhere. You can see the ruling classes in all the capitalist countries are fighting with one another. How do they survive the crisis? One of the things that's terrifying them is that despite the fact that we in the alternative media are so small, they are desperate to silence our voice. They're desperate because people are starting to hear truths that make sense to them, and it's giving them ideas. It's giving them a thirst for organisation, a thirst for something different, for a different alternative. And that's why we're getting such a push now for the control and the censorship of social media. And they're trying to present it as if the demand is coming from the masses. Every day now, there's a fresh story about some tragedy, some child who saw an image she shouldn't, someone who was groomed, someone who committed suicide. Heart-wrenching stories of horrible things that happen to people through their exposure to the bad side of social media. But the aim is not to protect the lives of the innocent. The aim is to crush the truth. The aim is to make it look as if we, for our own preservation, have asked them to police social media for us. And who are the targets going to be? The targets are going to be us, and don't fall for it. Absolutely do not fall for the campaign of please police social media because there's paedophiles on it, or there's bullies on it, or any of the rest of it. It's about silencing the alternative, but they are scared. They are very scared by the rise, the ability now. What did George say? Ignorance now is self-inflicted. Ignorance used to be blanket because we just weren't told anything. Now, with the internet, if you want to find out, you can. If you want to find out, you can, and you have to decide not to stay ignorant. And that's really important. These duopolies, these Tweedledum and Tweedledee situations all over the world, they are under threat. And our voice is starting to come through, and so we have to defend that voice, we have to build that voice, but we have to build not only a media, but an organisation that backs us up, backs up our power against this state machine. I just want to come back on one thing someone said earlier. It was about imperialism. I think everybody in this room, however they label themselves, should go home and read Lenin's book on imperialism. It's really short. It was written 100 years ago. You will not find a sentence in there that you disagree with. And there's one sentence I want to say to you. He said, imperialism doesn't seek democracy, it seeks domination. Does that or does that not describe the world that you see today?